I'm Matt Beam, Chairman and CEO of Heartsook. Welcome to the first ever Heartsook Block Power Philanthropy Summit, something I have envisioned for many years as a proud two-time alumnus of the Block School. With participants from many U.S. states, the United Kingdom, Mexico, and El Salvador, we are truly in for a great morning together. And thanks to the Block School for partnering with Heartsook to host the summit. We are both committed to improving people's lives by helping donors, volunteers, and nonprofit professionals bring their best to the organizations and missions they support and serve. If you've been paying attention, you've noticed that Heartsook has spoken and written a lot lately about the power of philanthropy. It's what makes our partnership with the Block School such a good fit, and it's what unites each of us here today. The power of philanthropy is unleashed when donors, volunteers, and nonprofit professionals work together to achieve goals they cannot on their own. Donors are most fulfilled when their philanthropy enables things that are personally important to them, acts only possible when volunteers and staff are involved. Similarly, volunteers find greatest satisfaction when they use their talent and relationships to advance causes that are important to them and enable others to give meaningfully. And nonprofit professionals, whether executive directors, fundraisers, or program managers, are optimally engaged when they bring donors and volunteers together to achieve individual goals that rely on the others' involvement. When we unleash the power of philanthropy, the sum is greater than its parts. Heartsook and Block certainly understand the power of philanthropy from their roles in the fundraising and larger nonprofit communities. But a lingering question remains. How do we spark the power of philanthropy today, at a time when many are trying to find their way forward, balancing redoubled commitments to their missions and sensitivity to the pandemic, racial tensions, and their impact? On March 17th, less than a week before many stay-at-home orders began, the Chronicle of Philanthropy published an article entitled, "What We Have Learned from Crises and Can Use in the Coronavirus Age." In it, a panel of 35 fundraisers and philanthropic leaders reflected on previous crises and offered the following piece of leading advice. Don't stop talking to big donors just because the world is being shaken. Past experience shows some donors never forgive the charities that don't reach out in times of need. That has always been Heartsook's unwavering counsel. It's also the clear message I've gleaned in my interactions with Block School leaders, Ben Shang, and today's panelists, whom it's now my pleasure to introduce. Mike Gakey is Executive Director of the JE&LE Mabee Foundation in Midland, Texas. The Mabee Foundation began in 1948 and primarily works to help nonprofit organizations build or renovate buildings. Since its founding, the Mabee Foundation has made grants totaling more than $1.2 billion. Prior to assuming his current position with the Mabee Foundation, Mike practiced law for 10 years and spent 18 years in full-time vocational ministry at Stonegate Fellowship in Midland, Texas, and at First Baptist Church of San Francisco. Mike earned a Bachelor of Business Administration in Finance from Baylor University and a JD from Texas Tech School of Law. David P. Miles is president of both the H&R Block Foundation and the Marion and Henry Block Family Foundation. Prior to joining the H&R Block Foundation in 2002, David was a member of the Greater Kansas City Community Foundation staff team. He helped donors accomplish their charitable goals by making sure they received maximum financial benefit in charitable giving and aligned their values with community needs. David also has more than 8 years of experience increasing alumni financial support and volunteerism at the University of Missouri, Kansas City, University of Missouri, Columbia, and Stevens College. David holds a Bachelor of Science from the University of Missouri, Columbia. As founder, president, and CEO of Echo Select, Jeanette Hernandez Pringer leads one of the top 500 Hispanic businesses in the country, with more than 300 employees serving clients nationwide and in Canada. As the talent behind the technology, EchoSelect is a talent acquisition and advisory consulting company, specializing in providing people, process, and technology solutions for its clients. Jeanette founded EchoSelect in 1995 with one client. With offices in Kansas City and Washington, D.C., it has grown into a leading provider of technology talent for Fortune 1000 companies and government agencies. Jeanette is a graduate of Park University with a Bachelor of Science in Management Information Systems. Randy Vance serves as president and COO of the Sunderland Foundation, a $1.4 billion private foundation founded in 1945. Randy joined the foundation in 2019 and is responsible for executing strategies determined by its board of trustees and overseeing its day-to-day operations. The foundation's areas of interest include higher education, youth-serving agencies, health facilities, affordable housing, and civic and cultural initiatives. During 2019, the foundation made more than $150 million in grants to more than 250 organizations. Before joining the Sunderland Foundation, Randy served Ashgrove Cement, where he began as CFO in 2011, became president and COO in 2014, and was named CEO in 2017. The Sunderland Foundation owned about a third of Ash Grove when it was sold in June 2018, after which Randy continued to serve the company until September 2019. Prior to his time with Ash Grove, Randy held various financial leadership positions with Interstate Bakeries, Farmland Industries, and Commerce Bank. Randy holds a Bachelor and a Master of Business Administration, both in finance, from the Block School. Before we hear from our panelists, I want to recognize all who worked to make today's summit possible. The Block School team was led by Dean Brian Kloss and supported by Doctors David Renz and Arif Ahmed, whom you'll hear from later, and Dr. Scott Helm, Associate Director of the Midwest Center for Nonprofit Leadership, among several other roles. The Block team provided significant contributions, particularly in the technical arena that made today's Zoom Summit possible. The Hartsook team, led by Karen Cox and with strong support from Vice President of Support Services Tammy Weinman, COO Danny Coors, and Executive Vice Presidents Janelle Johnson and Ross Pfannenstiel, provided important leadership of the summit's structure and program development. Today would not have been possible without each of the Block and Hartsook team members' important contributions. Thank you to all of you. Now on to our panel discussion. We shared a few questions with our panelists in advance, but we're also eager to know what's on your mind. As you think of questions for our panelists, please share them in the Zoom chat for Karen Cox to pose later during the panel. I'll initially ask a specific panelist to answer each of the first 4 questions. After she or he has responded, I'll invite the other panelists to share their thoughts. Jeanette, the first question initially is for you. Describe a particularly meaningful gift you made and why it was significant. Did the nonprofit organization you supported or its development team and volunteers contribute to the gift's special meaning? If so, how? Jeanette?
Over the years, we've given to a lot of different charities, some more than others, but typically the ones that we give the most to are because they touch us in a very meaningful way, whether it's an individual that we're close to, such as my family with my mother, or children, whatever the case may be. The reason we also chose that particular organization, because there's so many that do the type of work that they do, is because of their outcomes. And taking a look at the metrics and the way they run the organization, I felt that it was well worth our commitment to advance their cause.
Thank you. Randy, any thoughts you would have in response to the question?
I think one of the most meaningful grants that the organization has made has been $75 million grant to the Children's Mercy Research Institute here in Kansas City. Our board of trustees, almost all of them are parents, and some are grandparents, and myself, a parent and grandparent, and things that we can do that have a long-term impact on pediatric research and potentially has the ability to change lives throughout the world was really important for our trustees. And that facility is going to open next month, kind of on a soft opening basis, but it's poised to conduct just groundbreaking research in the areas of pediatric medicine. And we're pleased to be able to support that research building, and it's going to be fantastic for our community.
Thank you, Randy. David, what thoughts would you have in response to the question?
Yeah, thank you, Matt. One of the things that we were most proud of is the timely responses to really providing some food distribution for vulnerable populations. Working with two of our local organizations, we figured out how to get some flash freezers in quickly, get it organized to where volunteers could be safely distanced, and to get the perishable and fresh foods, and also then just basic food needs to very vulnerable populations in Kansas City. So we are proud of that grant.
Thank you. Mike, how about you?
Yeah, so many. Trying to think of one was difficult. The best part of this job is getting to be involved in so many meaningful projects. But I was thinking through it, and the one that just popped in my head first was a grant that we made to the Fundamental Learning Center in Wichita, Kansas. And there were so many parts of that, but I love it when someone comes in with a particular population that may not be the most popular of populations to work with. They don't get a lot of press. They aren't on the front lines of what everybody's interested in. And we had they came in with their organization, which was awesome. And the mom who started that organization years ago, because her son had dyslexia and there were no resources, and to hear the story of where it's come, and to hear their hope and what they're doing, not just for the kids, but to help the families, to educate teachers, and to impact the whole education system. It was really inspiring and encouraging and uplifting. And they were building a beautiful building, which was important to me. Like, they were building a building that showed the value of the population they were serving, and all of those things made that probably one of the most impactful I've only been here a year, and in my year here, one of the most impactful that we've done.
That's great. All very helpful responses for all of us, regardless of the roles we play in the nonprofit sector. Mike, I'm going to ask you to initially answer this next question. An organization is raising money for a large new facility right now, at this moment in time. How can they best make the case to support their campaign?
Well, it's I think they would do it not just in this time. They would do it how they should do it in every time. And I think one of the most important things for us is the why. Why is this facility needed? We want to know what you do and all of those things, but we want to know why this particular facility is needed for you to carry out your mission. And I think right now, especially, I've been so inspired by nonprofit leaders and the way they've almost been forced to be innovative and creative. And we want to see that innovation and that creativity. What are you doing in this time? And as you look forward with it in an uncertain future, how innovative and creative have you been to make sure that this building is what you need to carry out what your organization has been called to do?
Thank you. Randy, what are your thoughts in response to the question?
Well, I think Mike said it well. We really like a thorough needs assessment to be part of any grant application, and how that kind of folds into any strategic plans that an organization might have. We always encourage folks to come to us early in the process. Don't come to us just to ask for money. Come to us with your plans, your aspirations, and why you think it's important to either build something or renovate something. And if you're in increasing scale, that's really important. What are the outcomes from that investment? And really make the case, as Mike said, as to the why that you'd like to build or renovate something. And we're always interested to hear those stories and those aspirations.
Excellent, thank you. Jeanette, how about you? How could an organization best make the case right now for a new facility?
Well, as a business owner, especially right now with COVID, one of the things that are important is timing. Is it really necessary right now, given the way people are connecting? Have there been changes to the way they're thinking about using the building? Because with technology, physical spacing, those type of things, will there be the same need that they thought there was pre-COVID and moving forward for the next few years? Obviously, scalability and having the other factors involved, as the other gentleman communicated, are important. But now's a good time, if things haven't started, is to really think about your timing. Obviously, also construction costs just go up. So if you're doing building or renovating, you want to make sure that you can take advantage, especially with money being cheap if you have to borrow it. But for me, I take a look at, is the timing well? Is this just being done because they feel it's part of an evolution, or is there truly that need? And do they need to rethink a little bit some of the lessons learned through this time frame where we connect a little differently?
Thank you. David, how about you in your reflection on the cases that are made for facilities being built right now?
I think, I'll just kind of echo some of the things that the other panelists said. I think for us is, we've moved a lot of our focus over to service providing. So I think that, especially within construction and any type of capital projects, it needs to be proven of why it needs to be now. Why is it critical at this phase? Can it wait? At the same time, we do recognize that there's great opportunity right now for construction because costs, hopefully, are starting to reduce, and as organizations and as companies need work. So,
thank you. Again, I would remind everybody at the summit, if you have questions for our panelists, be sure to get those in the chat. We are receiving all of those right now, and we'll be looking forward to asking those for you of our panelists in just a few minutes. Randy, the next question I'm going to ask you to initially answer. Given the current environment with the pandemic and racial tensions, do you see any long-term impacts on philanthropy in the Kansas City region and other regions you serve nationally and globally? And if so, what might they be?
Well, I think one of the long-term impacts is going to be the needs of nonprofit organizations to serve their clients and those receiving services. Those needs, I think, are going up, and they really started going up in March, and I think they're going to continue to go up dramatically, potentially for the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, depending on how the economy recovers from COVID. At the same time as the needs are going up, many nonprofits were forced to close. And so that put their clients at a huge disadvantage and a big void in what they need. And through those closures too, many nonprofits are unable to raise funds through earned income or other fundraising activities. I know throughout the summer, it's a big fundraising opportunity for many nonprofits. A lot of those plans have been canceled. So I think philanthropy is going to be really needed to respond mightily as these changes work through our nonprofit providers and help them expand services over time to parts of the population that maybe they've never touched in the past. I think about significant homeless issues that are on the horizon with evictions and people that don't have jobs and unable to make rent payments. Many of the federal programs that provided aid have now run out, and it remains to be seen how some of those might get reestablished. But I think you've got homeless issues. I think you've got job training issues. There have been many jobs that have been lost that won't come back in the same form or fashion. And a lot of our folks will need to be retrained and find other types of jobs that they can make a living wage at. So there's just a lot going on, as everyone knows. And I think now more than ever, philanthropy is needed to step up and serve these organizations because their scope and benefit is increasing as well. So there's a lot of work to be done, and it's not just today or next week or even the remainder of this year. I think it's with us for several years potentially.
Thank you, Randy. Jeanette, I'd be interested in your perspective on the long-term impacts on philanthropy in the city and region, and certainly nationally, both from the perspective of a corporate owner and also individually. What are your thoughts about that?
You know, I think obviously COVID has really forced us to look inward at the way we work and how we connect, obviously with not-for-profits, keeping them in mind as to how we help them. But the other piece of that question was what's happening in our country with racial tensions. And one of the things that I have appreciated from the boards I sit on is looking inward. Who are we serving, and do we mimic that composition of diversity on our boards, on the people that help serve, reaching out to volunteers who can be potential role models, be the face for some of the constituents. Obviously, every not-for-profit, they have different constituents and stakeholders, but I think that we've really taken a look at, are we distributing and diversifying our own skills and experiences amongst a broad group? And in a lot of cases, it hasn't been that way. And I love that we're now having these conversations and we're pulling people up to help out in their communities.
Excellent. Thank you for that. David, I'd be interested in your perspective on how the current environment is impacting philanthropy, both in the Kansas City region and other areas where you are involved.
Yeah, I think, kind of the two different issues there. I mean, the pandemic to us has really created unprecedented challenges for our nation, of course, for our city. And while all nonprofits are struggling to serve clients and maintain operations, they're simultaneously facing the threat of financial instability, through loss of revenue, reduction of service or loss of revenue streams, also service disruptions, then also, of course, then the uncertainty of their own financial futures. I think our task as charitable foundations is during this crisis is really to help to leverage the resources to maximize the effect and really the responsibility and the timely grant making to organizations and programs to provide that money to the most capable of those to address the needs of the vulnerable populations in our cities. And then really in response to that, we've really began to focus much more on public health and infrastructure to serve the mass populations, and of course, kind of coordinated essential services for vulnerable populations. But then really if you move to social equity and really some of the injustices, we see that this is really shined a bright light on the longstanding and embedded structural racism in the United States. It's also highlighted and exacerbated the social disparities and inequities we see in our communities. I think addressing and really enacting both institutional and individual change necessary to put an end to structural racism is truly our nation's greatest challenge, at least modern day challenge, and is undoubtedly long overdue. I really see our role as foundations as really how do we advance and accelerate meaningful and progressive change and to help individuals improve our communities.
Thank you, David. That's very insightful and helpful. Mike, I'd be interested in your perspective on the current environment and its impacts on philanthropy.
We serve in 6 states, so it's been interesting to try to kind of assess for the people that we work with what the impact of all this is on the philanthropy side of things for them. And I think I've seen some differences in the organizations in big cities is different than the organizations in smaller communities. For sure, we do capital grants at the Maybe Foundation, and many foundations are pulling back on capital, which is making a smaller pool of foundation resources available for those organizations trying to expand their buildings and their physical plants. At local foundations in Midland, I know, and in other places have begun to focus more on operational needs and frontline needs. And so that's hurting those organizations that are trying to build buildings. So that's an issue. We saw some tightening just in talking with our grantees. We do challenge grants, so we stay communicating with them as they're trying to raise the remainder of their funds to meet our challenge. And we saw a lot of tightening of individual donors as well. They're tightening their belts, but that is starting to loosen up. And I'll just say I've been so encouraged by the amazing generosity in the face of all this uncertainty that we've heard of through our grantees and the monies they've been able to raise from individuals. I think nonprofit organizations are going to have to broaden their support bases. They're going to have to figure out how to maybe, instead of going for the big dollars, they're going to have to go for a lot more smaller dollars. So I think there's just going to have to be some changes in what their expectations on foundation support, but also on individual and corporate support. Corporations are also stretched, and so everyone's going to have to decide where's the best impact of my money. And that means the organizations are going to have to really distinguish themselves. Why give money to my food bank instead of giving a lot of money to a bunch of smaller food banks or something? So it's just going to require some real strategy, I think, as organizations seek to raise funds. As I think maybe one of the other panelists said, the needs are going to only increase. So it's going to just require a lot of work and thoughtfulness on the part of the organizations.
Thank you all. Very helpful insight and responses. David, I want to direct the next question initially to you. There has been obviously a lot of evaluation of opportunities and also challenges in this last period. And one kind of organization that has really tried to find its way forward are those in the arts community. And so the question is, how can arts organizations not involved in direct human service activities distinguish themselves to you and others during the pandemic in this time of racial tension?
Man, I think this is a sector right now that is probably has the greatest challenge, because in a lot of ways, a lot of arts organizations are having really difficulty of access to their own clients, and or if they're performance based, they're very limited or have no performance opportunities, which not only eliminates the donor engagement, but also eliminates the revenue generating side of their operations. So I think the arts organizations have the biggest challenge at this time in securing fundings. I think the most important thing there is to keep your most close donors closer, bring that fold a little much more, make sure they understand the financial challenges, make sure you're being as responsible as you can with your own budgets, eliminate costs as much as you can. I think then the donors see that you're doing every attempt that you have. Then our side is to really figure out how that strategy of not only how do we keep you alive, but also how do we engage you in programming. Where are the opportunities that we can actually have? Because I know it's hard to do virtual, but hopefully we can make it through this time period. But I do think that's the hardest thing. I think it's truly just trying to bring your closest donors as close as you can to you.
That's very helpful. Thank you, David. Jeanette, I would be interested in your perspective. How can arts organizations distinguish themselves right now in the present?
Personally, I take a look at the arts as an opportunity to recruit people into our city as part of our economic development, as that jewel that helps with the positive impacts, not only for those that enjoy the arts, but also as outreach and as part of history for children. So one area that the not-for-profits can tap into is the business community, showing them how their outreach and education helps the schools. Even though they may be learning virtually, there are still opportunities to grow in the community with our students. The other piece is allowing them to comment on their impacts to the community regarding the number of visitors they bring in. When things come back to normal, they need to be here. It's part of our fabric, and it also allows us to be rich and take pride in something that bigger cities have. So I'm a big supporter of the arts for those reasons, and I think other business owners, when they see it as economic opportunity, they look at it a little bit differently and will be more supportive.
Excellent. That's very helpful. Thank you, Jeanette. Randy, from your perspective, how can arts organizations right now distinguish themselves?
Well, I think one way is to really challenge the arts organizations to innovate what they're doing during these uncertain times and during the challenges that the pandemic has presented. Innovate how they stay in touch with donors, innovate how they stay in touch with their patrons, and how they message the community about what's going on, even though their doors may be closed. And then a little bit longer term, I think that innovation needs to extend to how can the arts organizations bring in new pockets of society to enjoy and benefit from those organizations. And particularly, we like to see organizations come to us with plans to talk about, we're going to have new programs and new services for different pockets of the underserved communities. Again, trying to extend the reach so that more people can enjoy and benefit from those organizations. They're a vital part of our community, and they really have been challenged, and many of them have shut down. I think the Nelson just reopened last week, I believe, and we need to work hard to get those organizations up and running when it's appropriate, and to innovate the way they get back into the ball game and how they can extend their reach further into our communities.
Thank you, Randy. Mike, from your perspective, arts organizations, how can they distinguish themselves and continue to advance their missions in the moment we're in?
Yeah, we don't do a lot of work with arts organizations. I agree. I think Randy said almost what I would say. I think we look at how are you using what you do in the arts community to educate kids? You know, for example, are you bringing and working with school districts, and are you doing things to impact the public school kids of your community? That's a big one for us. And then the other one is, how are you reaching underserved or vulnerable populations? And it's kind of hard right now. I think we're going to get beyond this pandemic at some point, where people will go back to museums and people will be able to go to performances, and they need to be ready for that, because the other needs are going to remain as well. So they're going to be competing for those same dollars with maybe the more frontline needs. But if they can show us, here's how we are trying to open up what we do beyond rich white people, which oftentimes is sort of what you associate with a lot of the arts community. And how are you getting beyond that? We worked with the local museum on their children's museum, and they've gone completely, very nice, beautiful facility, going completely bilingual, because we have a large Hispanic population here, Spanish speaking. They've done a completely bilingual children's museum, and that was impressive to us. That is possibly getting in a whole community that never would have walked into that facility. You know, so we're looking for those kind of things as well.
Very helpful, especially your comments about how you connect to the arts at the foundation. Want to ask just for a set of quick responses before we move into the questions from our summit participants. Really interested just in a sort of a 3 to 4 to 5 sentence response. How, in your perspective, organizations that best involve volunteers and or staff members in your interactions with them do so? What are the ways that really stands out and is memorable? David, I'll start with you.
I think volunteers are a critical aspect of any nonprofit organization, whether it's from board governance all the way down to service providing. We find our interactions with, especially the board member side, is incredibly powerful to see the commitment, see the understanding that they have to the organizational structure and to the organizational goals. So I think that from a standpoint of, I'll answer from a standpoint of the volunteers from the governance standpoint. I think from us, of course, we always enjoy the interaction and want to interact with the professional staff, but it's also very meaningful to have that knowledge of also who's on the board, but also how much engagement they have.
Great. Jeanette, how about you? How do those that best involve volunteers and staff do so?
Well, I'll go outside of the board volunteers. I'm going to look at real volunteers that, as for board members, it's the 3 T's, right? Time, treasure, talent. Being able to connect with volunteers. And so now that we're not able to meet with them personally with the not-for-profits, being able to pick up the phone, send emails, to be top of mind, because I think that's the way the volunteers continue to stay engaged during this time when we're not able to be with each other physically.
Thank you. Randy, how do you experience well-involved volunteers and staff members in your work?
I think the best of class of those kinds of organizations bring into meetings, whether it be virtual or in person, either board members or volunteers or even professional staff that can really demonstrate a true passion and commitment to the mission of the organization. It's not just about a meeting about raising funds. It's really letting us understand what's driving those organizations from the heart of the people that are involved. And those stories about passion and commitment and demonstrating actually the work that's being done by those organizations, that can really resonate in a meeting and can really affect the way funders view opportunities with those organizations in the future.
Great. Mike, how about you? Volunteers and staff optimal involvement.
I agree. Having them in meetings is great. Board members and staff members are more common. I love it when we see a a regular volunteer who is committed and bought into what they're doing in that organization, I mean, that can be really powerful on the vision and the passion side of things. Another thing that we really like to see is board support. We want to see board financial support in projects. And what is really powerful to me is when you see not just board support, but you see staff support, and you see a board member giving $250,000 and you see a staff person giving $250,000, and you know that was every bit as or more of a sacrifice, and you see their financial buy-in. I mean, that's pretty powerful for us. That says a lot about an organization to us.
Thank you. I want to now ask Karen Cox, Heartsook's president and co-founder, to pose to you, the panelists, questions that she has been receiving throughout the morning from our summit participants. Karen?
Okay, sure. I have a question here from Aaron Melton, and they ask, what influence does a nonprofit's advocacy or lack thereof have on your decision making? And do you think this has shifted at all given the current political and social climate? Let's start with Mike. We ended with him, but if we could start with him again, that'd be great.
I mean, I think we're looking at the same things we've always looked for. We want to, as far as advocacy, that's a broad term. We want to see them advocating for the population that they're serving. That's part of their organization. We don't necessarily care to see large, grandiose public statements or anything like that. We want to see them focused on the mission of their organization.
Great, thank you. Randy, how about you?
I agree with what Mike said. Yeah, I think the advocacy piece has not changed because of the pandemic. It's maybe more about amplifying the advocacy and the pace of things that need to come about in projects that nonprofits are considering. I do think that the pace probably needs to pick up because I think the needs have grown.
Okay, David?
Yeah, I think, same with advocacy. Is kind of a loaded word there. I think if you're looking at, fighting for the rights of your clients, whether that be in the local community or whether it be in legislative type activities, we are of course in favor of that. If you're getting into kind of more the political advocacy, that becomes a little more questionable. Number one, we have to watch also our statuses as a private foundation, but also we have to make sure that our organizations would also believe in the stance you're taking. So I'd say that very much focus on fighting for the rights of your clients.
Great. And Jeanette?
I really can't add anything more than that. Again, that word advocacy is so broad, and staying focused on the mission is what's important. Staying away from things that could be, as far as the not-for-profit, that could be viewed negatively. I would steer clear of that.
Okay, great, thank you. I have another question. I think 3 or 4 people have asked this. You may have already touched on it before, but Brenda Neal and Tanya Dorf-Bruner more or less said, so many foundations are focusing on capital needs, and given the difficulties that nonprofits are facing now during the pandemic, they're just trying to survive with operations, maybe policy improvement, consumer education. Is your foundation considering a shift, at least temporarily during these times, to focus a little more on operations? And Jeanette, I'll start with you again.
I actually am okay with helping a not-for-profit who I believe does a good job during this time period, supporting them to run operations. It's typically not what most people would do for a not-for-profit. It's usually something very specific that aligns with the mission. But if their mission is something I believe in, then I'm going to support them because I want them to be able to continue with that.
Yeah, good. And David?
Yeah, I think the flexibility that we have as a foundation is very, we're blessed in that manner. I know some of my colleagues in this call you have to follow your donor intent, what your own mission is as a foundation. That's the most critical thing we have to continue to do as a foundation also, is to realize that we have founders that they gave us a mandate, they gave us a purpose for our charitable dollars. From my standpoint, though, I have that flexibility to where I can shift from capital to program support. We have shifted significantly more of our grant making towards the program side, but at the same time, we've awarded a large grant also for construction activity that was critically needed, and it needed to be done right now. So, but my colleagues, they also have a mandate by their donors to do capital.
Great. And Randy, please.
Sure. Well, like David's organization, we have an organization with donor intent that is largely based on construction and renovation grant making. When the pandemic hit, we did pivot and we continued the grant making on the normal course for construction, but we did expand and we have provided some emergency operating funds to support health services and food insecurity and homeless here, mostly in the Kansas City region. So we did pivot and we're doing a little bit more of that. I don't think that's a permanent pivot for our organization. I think it was kind of an emergency response that we participated in, but I'd say we're open to considering those.
Great, thank you. And Mike, please.
Yeah, we have not shifted our focus from capital. We may. I'm not saying we would never do that, and if the capital requests were to dry up, then we might have to do something like that. But right now we're staying the course, and what we found in a lot of the grantees we work with is that they're finding a lot of foundations pivoting away from capital, and so we kind of feel like this is where we are, and this is how we've been. We also have donor intent. We have a long history of how we do capital grants, and so we kind of feel like maybe our place right now is to stay the course with that. We do challenge grants, so we have a long relationship with our grantees, and we've been helping them a little bit in different ways. That's sort of our way to reach in beyond our normal grant making processes with those capital donations and capital grants.
Okay, great. And I have a question from Emily Rappe Fisher from Children's Safety Center in Springdale, Arkansas, and she says, I learn a lot from what not to do as well. Do you have, what are some things that organizations have done that were not effective for you, or were just plain wrong? And Mike, I'll start with
I don't know. I don't know that I've seen any just really bad things. I think one thing that right now I encourage people to do is to not try to latch onto the COVID train. I think we're getting some requests that I feel like they're trying to make it COVID related because they think that might be interesting to us, and it doesn't feel sincere. So I think continue just to do what you do and to be honest and to be real, do your homework, be prepared. Those are the kind of things we like to see. I love we love to see a good presentation, a good application, well thought out, and not just, we like to see the heart behind these organizations as well. Don't just come in with black and white technical information.
Thank you. Randy.
Well, so we use an online grant portal submission tool to engage nonprofits who are seeking help from the Sunderland Foundation. And, I think the thing that I would encourage organizations not to do would be to submit an application for a large amount and have never talked to us or don't have any kind of relationship with us before that time. It's always good to start building a relationship before you really need to ask for something. And we value those relationships, and we like to nurture those, and it lets us really learn about an organization's mission and the good they're doing in communities. You just don't get that through reading a cold application. Now, the application is real important, and it needs to be well thought out and well written, but I would encourage folks, when they need help, they need to be kind of seeding those relationships early and often, well before needs really arise when they come to us and ask for help.
Excellent. Okay, and David.
I think, I can't say there's really any mistakes someone could make. I mean, I'd say that the thing that we see the most is when an organization comes forward just with a basic, we need money. Everybody needs money. So I think that the more thought out it can be, the more of a plan that's been into place where you demonstrate what the needs are of the individuals you're serving. You've shown how you have actually responded appropriately and making adjustments to your own operations, to your own financials, then also demonstrating, really what can the impact of the dollars that we would provide, how it would assist you. I would say the mistake is just coming with a blanket support of just, we just need money.
Jeanette, please.
I think the only thing I can really add is transparency and honesty. So being transparent about the needs, the person that wrote in the question was what not to do. Don't lie. Don't tell us it's for one thing and then use it for something else, or we find out things are really different. So if you're transparent and honest, that goes a long way.
Thank you, Jeanette. What we'd now like to do is give each of you as panelists just about a minute to share whatever concluding thoughts you would have. Jeanette, I'm going to start with you.
I feel it's so important to be able to give back, whether it's part of a foundation that's been decades in the making, or a small business owner like myself. It is our responsibility as stewards to make sure that we help those in need and to be good citizens and good to our community. So I love that you are putting this on and helping not-for-profits learn best practices, and also those who are wanting to give, making sure we also understand what are really the things that we need to watch out for so that we are helping move forward missions that really truly serve. Thank you so much for allowing me to be on this panel. It was a real honor and pleasure.
Thank you, Jeanette. We appreciate all that you've shared. David, final thoughts and perspectives from you.
Yeah, first of all, I want to thank all of the providers that are on this call today. We have the great pleasure of being funders. You're the ones that are out there doing the direct service to the individuals, vulnerable populations in our communities that are in need. So I think the thing I always want to say is thank you to you for all the work that you do. The other thing that just words of wisdom that I always try to share is realize that all foundations are different. Just like you approach every individual that you on your board or every individual that's one of your major donors, realize that every foundation has a different personality. They have different processes. They have different things they're interested in. So please get to know your foundations, know your representatives of those foundations, so you can know what we're seeking and what our donor intent is, because we do have the mandates by the donors that have created our foundations. But also, I will echo the comments of earlier. Please be honest. Look at developing long-term relationships. We're going to make investments with your organizations, and hopefully we'll be doing it for many, many years into the future. So please make sure that you're honest, forthright, share conclusions. We said we've never really had any grants that have failed. We have some that have not been. We have some that have been unsuccessful. But our goal is to learn with you the lessons that you had from that failure, and then how do we then grow and improve those systems and the grants that we make also. So we say please also provide us with that information that isn't always pleasant also. So, but Matt, thank you to Heartsook and to the Block School and all the participants that are on the call today.
Thank you, David. Randy, your parting thoughts and final perspectives.
Well, we certainly understand the enormous pressure placed on nonprofits these days, given our current challenges as a society. And we are here to try to help and learn and try to do all we can to make organizations successful in carrying out their missions. The need is great, and I think the need will continue to grow and potentially change a bit in the next couple of years. We'll do all we can to try to help organizations fulfill those needs and create scale and scope that really addresses the real needs of our communities. And we hold the nonprofits that we partner with in high regard, and we can't thank them enough for the services they perform, and we're their biggest cheerleader. So it's been a pleasure to be with you, Matt, and to be with all the other panelists, and certainly have enjoyed the conversation, and good luck to all of those that are watching. Thanks.
Thank you, Randy. Mike, your final thoughts and perspectives on the morning.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me today. It's been great to hear from all the panelists, and appreciate you guys for putting this on, and everyone who attended. I think this job is so amazing, because I get to talk to people every day that are doing inspiring, necessary, thoughtful, important things. Even the ones we can't end up partnering with or funding. I've never had anyone I've talked to that I haven't left the conversation inspired and a little more hopeful about our world. And I think this season is difficult for nonprofits, and it's made me so aware of that. But I have been so impressed by the creativity and innovation that I have seen coming out of nonprofits from the smallest to the largest we work with. And I just want to encourage everyone who's listening today that I believe the innovation that's come out of all this crisis will bear fruit for years to come. And I applaud all of you. And I just want to encourage you guys to press on. Your funding is out there. You may just have to work harder to find it, but you'll get what you need. And then we are excited to see really the good that comes out of all of the crisis of the last few months. And again, thanks so much for having me today.
Thank you, Mike. We appreciate that. I want to thank each of our panelists, Jeanette, David, Randy, and Mike. I also want to thank Karen Cox, my colleague and a partner in all the great work we do. We are grateful to all of you and invite you to continue with us for the balance of the summit. It's going to be a great morning. I now want to turn the program over to Brian Kloss, the Dean of the Block School of Management at the University of Missouri, Kansas City, who will guide us on our next steps. Dean Kloss.
Thank you to our distinguished panelists. This summit was designed to engage community stakeholders in important conversations that could enhance professional practice, and this panel really offered a very, very useful exchange. So thank you very much. This panel session also very nicely sets up our morning's next segment. In our programs here at Block, we emphasize being able to hear from experts, such as our panelists, and then also being able to dig deeper via peer-to-peer exchange. So in our next segment, we will focus on some valuable peer-to-peer learning, where you will have the opportunity to hear how professionals from different settings might apply some of what you just heard. So we will now move to moderated breakout rooms. Each of you have been assigned to a breakout room with a moderator from Hartsook or from Block. Your moderator will work with the group to explore in depth the points that were made in our panel session. So very shortly, Zoom will direct you to your breakout room with roughly 30 minutes allocated for this, and then you'll receive a 1-minute warning prior to being brought back to the larger overall group. We will be capturing the ideas that surface in these breakout sessions, and the idea will be that we will then share that with the larger group, some of the critical observations that were developed. So enjoy your discussion, and we look forward to seeing you here back shortly.